I had this nagging feeling that something wasn't quite right, but I really wanted to convince myself I was wrong. Sophie and I had been married for 7 years, and we had two boys, 4 and 6 years old. I had a good job in upper management at a tech company, and Sophie was eager to work, which I fully supported. We often talked about our dreams of retiring someday and living the good life. You know what I mean? Sophie was employed in the accounting department of a small firm. Every morning, we left for work simultaneously, taking turns dropping the boys off at daycare and preschool. We kept in touch throughout the day via text, and I usually picked the kids up on my way home. By the time I got back, Sophie would often be in the kitchen, whipping up dinner. Our evenings revolved around the kids. We'd play with them, watch a bit of TV, tuck them into bed, and then carve out some adult time, typically 3 nights a week and a few more on weekends. We both seemed satisfied with this routine. However, about 3 months ago, a new woman started working with Sophie, and for some odd reason, they hit it off right away. Maybe it was because this new friend also had a husband and 2 boys the same age as ours. We found ourselves spending several weekends bouncing back and forth for barbecues and playdates. Honestly, I didn't care for either of them. This new woman smoked and treated her husband like he was some kind of servant instead of an equal. It was painful to watch him shrink whenever she reprimanded him for spilling his beer. He had a serious drinking problem, and when he apologized, it felt like he was an abused child just looking for approval. A couple of weeks ago, we were at their place. While Sophie and Rachel were inside preparing snacks, the kids were glued to a Disney movie. Ryan and I sat on the back deck, nursing our drinks. I was still on my first beer while he was finishing his third, clearly having had a few before we arrived. Slurring his words, he remarked, "I never would have thought you were like that. I always pictured you as some big tough guy. I guess they come in all shapes and sizes." Honestly, I wanted to bail about 15 minutes after we got there, but I stayed to keep an eye on the drunken mess, making sure he stayed away from the kids. "What do you mean? Nobody would believe you're one." I shot back, puzzled. He replied, "You let your wife go out with Rachel every week. What do you think they're up to? Just girl talk until midnight." I felt the urge to clarify a few things. About 2 months ago, Sophie started going out on Wednesday nights with her work friends. At first, she'd come home around 8, saying they had dinner and a drink or two. But soon, her arrival time stretched to midnight, claiming they lost track of time while discussing some work issue. She always came home needing to shower because she couldn't stand the smell of smoke in her hair. I loved my wife and trusted her, but I noticed she was less affectionate on the nights she went out with her friends. Every time she showered, it was always the same excuse about the smoke smell. Last Wednesday, I checked her clothes. Sure enough, they reeked of smoke, but something felt off. Her panties were hanging on the handrail in the shower. She had washed them. Why on earth would she do that? I couldn't shake my curiosity about Ryan's comment on cuckolding. "So you really think our wives go out every week and hook up?" I asked. He let out a loud burp and said, "Oh, I know they do. About a year ago, I noticed a hickey on Rachel's breast and a bruise on her hip. I knew I hadn't done that, so I confronted her about it. She admitted that one of her lovers got a little rough. Why do you still stick around?" I pressed. He replied, "You'll be in the same situation with Sophie when she finally comes clean. We live in a no-fault state. If I divorce her or she divorces me, it won't matter. She'd walk away with alimony, child support for our 2 kids, the house, while I'd be left footing the bill. I'd end up in a rundown apartment, living off cat food. That's why I'm still here. What about your relationship? Do you still have intimacy with her, knowing she's cheating?" I asked, genuinely curious. He smirked. "Oh, absolutely. That's part of the deal. I'm there for her whenever she wants, even after she's been out. I think she enjoys having that control over me." "How could she manipulate you like that?" I queried. "I told you if I don't comply with her demands, she'll divorce me. Cat food, remember? So how often does she go out?" I asked. "A couple of times a week. Sophie only goes out with Rachel once a week. The other nights, we're home together," I replied. "That will change," he warned. "She'll start going to parties. At first, she'll say it's a baby shower or a wedding shower. She'll have a good excuse for being out until the early hours. And then she'll come home with a headache or claim it's her period or that she's just too exhausted for a few days. Just wait and see. Right around that moment, the women came out onto the deck, and our conversation came to an abrupt halt. A couple of hours later, we made our way home. While Sophie tended to the boys, I retreated to my man cave to work on my computer. That night, I was completely drained. By the time I finally crawled into bed, I was anything but the wait and see type. As Ryan had predicted, Wednesday came, and I received a text from Sophie saying she was going out with the girls and might be late coming home. After I fed the boys and put them to bed following some mind-numbing TV, I wrapped up my work in my man cave. I sank into the living room, anxiously awaiting Sophie's return. At precisely 12:15 a.m., I heard her fumbling with the key in the door. As she stepped inside, I flipped on the light, causing her to jump back in surprise. "Damn, Lucas, you scared the hell out of me. What are you doing up at this hour?" she exclaimed. "Just waiting for you to come back from the Mandingo Club. Did you manage to hook up with a black bull?" I shot back, my tone dripping with sarcasm. "What are you implying? That I'm cheating on you?" she snapped, clearly feeling defensive. "We just had dinner and we're talking. Cut the act. You know what I do for a living. I know exactly where you were and what you were doing," I replied, irritation bubbling up inside me. At that moment, she flashed me a wicked smile that felt all too familiar, one I recognized from countless encounters. "So what? There's nothing you can do about it. If I want to sleep with every black guy in town, that's my choice. This is a no-fault state, remember? If you decide to divorce me, I'll get alimony and child support for our 2 kids. You'll be paying the mortgage and covering the boys' tuition. You might get to see them once a month if you're lucky. I'll just bring one of my bulls in here to help take care of the kids, and there's not a thing you could do about it. You'll end up in a dingy apartment, eating tuna from a can. So just deal with it. Honestly, this is probably just a passing phase for me. In a year or 2, I might be over my fascination with big black guys. Then we can get back to the life we once dreamed of. Now I'm going to shower and get ready for bed. You'd better be waiting when I come back." Her speech sounded so rehearsed, like it had been scripted by Rachel. I stood up, flicked off the light, and trudged upstairs. That night, there was no attempt at affection. I spooned next to her, but it was devoid of any intimacy. No sloppy seconds, no warmth, nothing. The next morning, everything returned to a facade of normalcy. I didn't want to upset the boys more than necessary before she left for work in a few weeks. Sophie informed me she would be going to a baby shower that Saturday night with Rachel. I couldn't help but chuckle at her. "You've never been good at lying, Sophie. If I have to accept that you're mingling with a bunch of black guys, you might as well be honest about where you're going. One of Rachel's black friends is throwing a party, and I'm invited. I'll be home around 3 a.m., she replied nonchalantly. "See? That wasn't so difficult, was it?" I responded. "Lucas, I love you, and I always will. This is just a fantasy, nothing more. Sophie, I've had my share of fantasies over the years, but I never acted on them. This isn't just cheating on me and breaking our marriage vows. It's cheating our boys too. I have to tolerate it because of the laws in this state, but it's still cheating. You better change your attitude. Things can get a lot worse for you," she shot back, her tone icy. "I'm trying. I just need some time. This is all so new for me, but I'm getting there little by little," I replied. "See you later." She left with a smile, believing I was destined to become her cuckold. She couldn't be more wrong. I decided to leave early and made a pit stop at her favorite lingerie shop in the mall. When she came home, I went all out to treat her like royalty. I prepared a bubble bath and laid out the new lingerie on the bed. She was ecstatic. I made a big production of helping her dress, encouraging her to strut around like she was on a runway. I showered her with compliments, telling her how much I adored her and how we could work things out. She responded by launching herself at me, smothering me in kisses, and then giving me an incredible blowjob. After finishing for the 4th time that night, we decided to call it a wrap. I figured I had recorded enough footage to edit it down to about 20 minutes featuring just her. I planned to blur my face out of the footage. That Saturday night, I watched her get ready for the party, and it was clear she was going to turn heads. I recorded her as she dressed, thinking I could use that footage too. She air-kissed me as she heard the horn honk outside. "Don't wait up," she called out excitedly as she bolted for the door. With the boys already tucked in, I made a beeline for my man cave. I had a mountain of work waiting for me. It was nearly 5 a.m. when I heard her stumbling up the stairs. "Lucas, come help me, please." "Of course, baby. Rough night," I replied, fully aware of what she meant. I was one of the only girls at the party, and there were 8 bulls, she slurred. "Sophie, keep your voice down or you'll wake the boys," I cautioned, noting how clearly drunk she was. I suspected she might have also indulged in something like Molly or ecstasy. It took some effort to quiet her down. Finally, I managed to get her upstairs and started undressing her. That's when I noticed the hickeys, dark, angry marks covering her neck and the tops of her breasts. She caught my gaze and grinned. "They marked me so you'd know exactly what I was up to." I told them you already knew, but they went ahead and did it anyway. "Look at this." With a flourish, she let her skirt drop, revealing the phrase "Black Banana Woman" tattooed in bold black ink just above her neatly trimmed red landing strip, surrounded by 8 initials. When she turned, I noticed Amir was here crudely scrawled across her back, complete with an arrow pointing toward her backside. "Isn't it thrilling?" she asked, her eyes sparkling, but I was left speechless. "Where are your bra and panties?" I asked, trying to maintain my composure. "They were taken as trophies," she replied, beaming with a mix of pride and defiance. I made her sit there until I was completely confident that everything that needed to drain had finished before helping her into the shower. Worried she might slip, I stripped off my boxers and joined her. I took the handheld shower head and carefully washed her down, making sure to clean both her front and back thoroughly. As the warm water cascaded over her swollen belly, I noticed it seemed to awaken something within her. With a tight embrace, she whispered, "I love you, Lucas. You always know just how to take care of me. I'm still pretty sore, but I'd really like to give you a blowjob." Before I had a chance to respond, she was already kneeling before me. She really had a talent for that, and I couldn't shake the thought that I would miss these intimate moments. Once we were done, I patted her dry and tucked her in a bed, letting her sleep through breakfast with the boys. I whipped up some pancakes and told the kids that Mommy was feeling sick. It wasn't until around 2 p.m. that she finally wandered into the kitchen, looking for something to eat. I quickly prepared a plate of pancakes, and she devoured them with a glass of orange juice. After listening to the boys chatter for about 10 minutes, she declared she was heading back to bed. I didn't mind. The boys settled in to watch a movie while I retreated to my personal space to finalize some arrangements with Mr. Onyekachi, who had won the bidding. Did you know that every year, over 250,000 girls and women vanish in the United States? It's shocking, but many people are unaware that 6 African countries still permit slavery and maintain active slave markets. One of these nations is the Democratic Republic of Congo, which also has the largest supply of cobalt in the world, essential for those electric cars that everyone believes will shape the future of transportation. Some Africans have become incredibly wealthy by exploiting slave labor to extract that cobalt. You won't hear about any of this at a clean air protest, though. In my line of work, I often track cybercriminals on the dark web. That's where I decided to post about Sophie, including a picture of her along with this description. She's a 26-year-old natural redhead, standing at 5'7" and weighing 115 pounds. She has 34C breasts with barely any sag, captivating green eyes, and skin that radiates the brilliant ivory typical of natural redheads. She enjoys all kinds of intimacy and has a particular fondness for big black bananas. Bidding starts at $50,000. I also attached a video. I closed the bidding when it reached $115,000 and contacted her new owner. After a few emails back and forth, I informed him I'd accept $100,000 if he provided me with certain specifics. He agreed without hesitation. Sophie didn't go to work on Monday, and I imagined her spending the entire day curled up in bed. By the time the boys and I returned home, she had managed to prepare dinner for us. Tuesday passed uneventfully. She went to work as usual. By Wednesday around noon, I received a text from her saying she was going out after work. I figured she was finally starting to feel better. She came home just before midnight, took a shower, and climbed into bed without saying a word. I chose not to ask her anything. On Thursday night, after getting the boys settled in for the night, I invited her to my man cave for a serious conversation. Sophie, I've been doing a lot of thinking about this new lifestyle you've embraced, or I guess we've embraced. I think I'm ready to dive in. Her face lit up like she had just discovered a hidden treasure. Thank you. You're going to be so happy. We'll take it slow at first. I promise I won't pressure you into anything you can't handle. But soon you'll see, just like Ryan did, that it could be incredibly fulfilling for you too. She was clearly getting ahead of herself. Sweetheart, I want us to take a little vacation and escape for a few days. I think I'd feel more comfortable being away from anyone we know for my first time, I said, choosing my words carefully. I've given it some thought, and I've booked us a flight to the Cape Verde Islands off the coast of Africa. You can soak up the sun on the beach during the day while I sit back and watch you flirt with all the locals. At night, we can visit a club where I can observe you dancing with different men. When you find the guy you want to be with, you can invite him back to our room. Just let him know that I enjoy watching. I'm open to whatever makes you comfortable, whether it's standing in the corner while I watch or sitting naked in a chair while you're with him. After he leaves, I'll make sure you reach your climax. She jumped from her chair and landed in my lap, showering me with kisses and gratitude. Thank you. I promise I'll be a caring and gentle mistress, not nearly as demanding as I am with Ryan. I'll always ensure your needs are met, whatever that entails. Her happiness was infectious, and I could sense her relief that I had finally accepted this new reality. She even brought up how thrilled that woman Rachel would be for us. Sophie mentioned there was another party planned for Saturday night, but that she intended to skip it. She was too busy shopping, packing, and making arrangements for the boys since we were leaving Sunday evening. She even expressed a desire not to be sore for the trip. On Tuesday, we arrived at a luxurious 4-star hotel in the capital city of Praia. The beach was breathtaking, and there were plenty of attractive men around the hotel and in the streets to keep my wife's interest piqued. Sophie seemed genuinely delighted, and when I suggested we make love before heading down for dinner, she eagerly agreed. I could practically feel the heat radiating off her. I showered first, got dressed, and told Sophie I'd meet her in the restaurant in an hour since she wanted to enjoy a bubble bath before slipping into her outfit. No problem. I had a few matters to discuss with Mr. Onyekachi. I found him waiting in the restaurant, casually sipping a drink. He looked exactly as I had pictured him. At 40 years old, he stood around 6'4" and weighed about 240 pounds, his head completely shaved. He stood up as I approached, and we exchanged a firm handshake. The two men with him were introduced as his personal security team. He was dressed in an Italian suit that probably set him back at least $5,000, complemented by a watch that had to be worth at least $15,000. As we settled into our seats, he flashed a smile and informed me that he had wired the money that afternoon after receiving the pictures of us checking into the hotel. I confirmed that I had seen the notification from my bank confirming the funds were received. He laid out a plan for the evening that I eagerly agreed to. Just as I was finishing my drink, Sophie walked into the restaurant, and she looked absolutely radiant. "Introduce me to your friends," she said, flashing a flirtatious smile at Mr. Onyekachi. He stood up as she approached and took her hand, introducing himself. "I'm James Onyekachi. These two gentlemen are part of my security team." He pulled out her chair, and she settled down gracefully. Lucas mentioned that his wife would be joining him for dinner, but I had no idea I would be meeting such a stunning woman. "You are undoubtedly the most beautiful sight I've seen since my arrival." Sophie's eyes were locked onto his. "Thank you, Mr. Onyekachi. "Are you here on vacation like us?" she asked, her curiosity evident. "Both business and pleasure," he replied smoothly. "I arrived on my yacht 2 days ago and wrapped up my business this afternoon. After meeting you, I'm very glad I decided to extend my stay for a couple more days." "I'm sorry. I don't mean to interrupt your dinner," he added, beginning to rise, but Sophie placed her hand gently on his arm. "No, don't go. Stay and have dinner with us. We'd love to hear more about Africa," she insisted. He settled back down and raised his hand, snapping his fingers. 2 waiters rushed to our table. "I'll join you, but it's on me." He ordered something in his native language, dismissing the waiters with a wave of his hand. Sophie was utterly captivated, hanging on to his every word as he shared stories about his tribe and his position as the oldest prince in line for the throne. He talked about his education in England and how he now managed the cobalt mines back home. Dinner was served, featuring a type of fish I didn't recognize. As we were finishing up, the band in the club began to play. He invited us to join him, taking Sophie's hand and leading her across the lobby toward the club. I followed behind slowly. Once inside, we found a table, and he wasted no time ordering a round of drinks. It didn't take long for him to ask Sophie to dance. At that moment, I might as well have been invisible because she didn't spare me a glance. She pressed her body against his on the dance floor, and they swayed together for about 15 minutes. When they returned to the table, he excused himself, saying he needed to make a phone call, and headed into the lobby. That's when Sophie turned to me, excitement radiating from her. "This guy is perfect. He's rich, well-educated, and hung like a horse. You're going to love watching me. I can't wait for that black snake to slither its way into my womb. When he gets back, I'm going to invite him up to our room and let him know that you like to watch, so you'd better behave. Lucas, if you mess this up for me, I'll have him and his bodyguards teach you a lesson. Understand? I get it. I won't be a problem," I replied. It was startling to see how quickly she had escalated from threatening my financial stability to outright physical harm. I assured her I would play my role in this twisted game. In all our years together, I had never heard Sophie speak like this before. When he returned to the table and sat down, Sophie asked, "Any problems?" "No, nothing like that. Just something I needed to handle back home before it got too late," he replied smoothly. "Why don't we take this party to our room?" Sophie didn't hesitate. "I'd love that," she responded eagerly, without even looking in my direction. He took her hand and led her out into the lobby. That was the last time I saw my wife, Sophie. After they left, I finished my drink, watching the dance floor filled with elegantly dressed men moving with white tourists. I had zero regrets about what I had done. The $100,000 would go into a college fund for our boys. I returned to our room and packed up all of Sophie's belongings into her 2 suitcases. Just as I was finishing, there was a knock at the door. I had been expecting it. One of Anyakachi's bodyguards entered, took the suitcases without a word, and handed me an envelope before leaving. The rest of the week, I lounged on the beach and explored the local shops. I flew home on our scheduled flight, without Sophie, of course. Back at home, I told the boys that Mama had decided to extend her stay on the islands a little longer. I was only postponing the inevitable pain for as long as I could. 3 days later, Rachel called, her voice a mix of disbelief and anger. "You've got to be kidding me. What happened to Sophie?" she demanded. I explained the wild situation of Sophie running off with a wealthy African man, but she didn't buy it. "What did you do to her?" she shouted, suspicion dripping from her words. After the call ended, I felt a tight knot of anxiety twist in my gut. The very next afternoon, Rachel showed up at my doorstep, flanked by a black detective who wore a serious expression. He stepped forward, demanding to know where my wife was and why I hadn't reported her missing. "She's not missing," I snapped, frustration bubbling up. "The last time I saw her, she left with a black man to spend the night on his yacht." I handed over a copy of Sophie's passport, which bore an exit stamp showing she had departed from the Cape Verde Islands 3 days prior. "I also checked with immigration and found this," I continued, handing him an email confirming her entry into the Democratic Republic of the Congo 6 days later. That's where she's living it up like a queen while I'm stuck here taking care of the kids and paying the bills. I can't wrap my head around how she could do this to me. The detective nodded, thanking me for my time, but I couldn't ignore the way his hand rested casually on Rachel's back as they turned to leave. It felt too intimate, too familiar. I assumed he was one of her bulls, likely getting a favor in return. I could picture her rewarding him later in the car on the way to her place, possibly stealing a kiss from Ryan. That could have been me, getting that kiss if I hadn't taken matters into my own hands. With the copies of Sophie's passport that Onyekachi provided, I filed for divorce. It took some time, but I finally managed to break free from that disloyal woman. And I certainly wasn't living off canned tuna. Revenge is best served cold, a lesson I picked up from Dangerous Liaisons, penned by Pierre Codellos de Laclos in 1782. Fast forward 5 months. I found myself enjoying lunch at a quaint cafe when Rachel's husband, Ryan, unexpectedly dropped into the seat across from me. After a few forced pleasantries, he began to unburden himself about his failing relationship with Rachel. Things have only gotten worse, he confessed, looking defeated. She's got me wearing a banana cage. I haven't had a climax in over a month. Why is that? I asked, pretending to care. She said I embarrassed her in front of one of her friends, he replied, shame etched across his face. How did you manage that? I was cleaning up after him when I got aroused again. He wanted me to continue, but I refused. Now I'm stuck in this never-ending cycle. I wish she'd find a rich guy with a big banana and leave me for him, just like Sophie did with you. You were lucky to escape. Yeah, very lucky, I replied, fighting to keep a straight face. Ryan slowly got up from the table, but his words echoed in my mind long after he left. All the problems Sophie and I had were tied to Rachel. That woman needed to face consequences. Later that night, after the kids were sound asleep, I began to craft a plan. Sophie was going to send an email. Well, sort of, but it would look like she did. I contacted Mr. Onyekachi and asked if he'd be interested in a 28-year-old blonde who was just as stunning as Sophie. He was quick to offer $50,000 sight unseen. If she truly resembled Sophie, he would send another $25,000 upon delivery. I assured him I'd keep him posted. Curiosity gnawed at me, and I couldn't resist asking about Sophie. It had been nearly 5 months, and I was dying to know how she was doing. She's become quite the performer, working 3 shows a night at one of my clubs. She's doing incredibly well and adjusted to the training faster than most. You should come visit her. I think you'd find it entertaining. He laughed. I seriously doubted Sophie was enjoying much of anything these days. After we hung up, I started drafting the email that would come from Sophie to Rachel. Dear Rachel, I'm so sorry it's taken me ages to write. My life has transformed into a dream, and you wouldn't believe it. First, I was accepted into James's tribe. You would have loved the ceremony. It was grand, attended by all the royal family members. Then came the wedding, so much sharing. Africans really love to share. Then we jetted off to Paris on the family's private jet. My new husband spoiled me rotten and let me shop until I dropped. Now I'm back in Kinshasa, living in a palace. I do absolutely nothing. We have maids, gardeners, and even servants who wait on me hand and foot. Some days I lounge by the pool, basking in luxury like the queen I am. But I miss you. We had so much fun together, making wild plans. I owe you so much. I think about you constantly. I wish you would consider taking a vacation in Africa this year. Leave your husband with the kids and come visit me. We could take the yacht and cruise the coast. I'll even get James to bring along his brother Ethan. He's not married, and believe me, he's just as well endowed as James. You'll adore him. I could even help you get accepted into their tribe. You know how much I love watching you mingle. Think about it. Love you, Sophie. After hitting send, I didn't have to wait long for a response. Dear Sophie, I'm over the moon to hear from you. Your life sounds absolutely exhilarating. I'm thrilled for you and grateful you credited me for helping you escape that tedious life you had here. Mine hasn't changed much since you left. I still go out on Wednesday nights and party on weekends, so I won't bore you with the details. Oh, one thing is different. I've got Ryan in a banana cage now. After I had Amir slap him around a bit, he fell in line. For embarrassing me, I put him in the cage, and it's been over a month now. He cries and begs me to let him out. I like your idea for a vacation. We were planning to take the kids to Disney World next month. I could let Ryan handle that trip and come see you instead. But as always, it's about the money. Right now, we can't afford the tickets to Africa and to Orlando. It took us 2 years to save for the Disney trip, but Ethan sounds intriguing. Keep in touch, Rachel. I wanted to seem casual, so I waited 2 days before replying. Dear Rachel, sorry for the delay in writing back. We just took a trip to the mines and flew in helicopters over the jungle and through the mountains. Africa is breathtaking. We stayed in our mansion, complete with everything a girl needs to be happy. And that means plenty of young male and female servants to cater to my every whim. Don't worry about the money. Just tell me the date you can come and when you need to return, and I'll take care of everything for you. Bring summer clothes and bikinis. Love you, Sophie. Her response came in a flash. An hour later, I had booked all the flight arrangements for Mrs. Rachel Adams to fly to Kinshasa in the DRC. It was a round-trip ticket, but she would only use half of it. She would never come back. Mr. Onyekachi was pleased with the arrangement and sent me another $25,000. The day before her departure, I emailed Ryan from Rachel's account, letting him know she had met someone and would be staying in Africa. It was short and sweet. About 2 weeks later, I was enjoying lunch when Ryan once again sat down across from me without invitation. I want to thank you, he said, his eyes sincere. For what? I asked, feigning ignorance. I don't know how you did it, but I just came from my attorney, and he said I shouldn't have any problems divorcing Rachel. What happened? I pressed, genuinely curious. No, I'm not playing this game with you again. Just thank you, he said, standing up and walking away. I noticed he seemed more relaxed as he left.